What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the J Area Podcast. My name is Jose Ramos Jr. And for those that have been following the podcast these last few weeks, you would know that I'm a big fan of sports and entertainment, and I've been combining my love for both in the sense of covering more professional wrestling. See, in the sense of my life and what I've experienced with my family, professional wrestling has always been there for me and our family for that regard. It's been the one place of escape that we've always been able to turn to when our life has gotten complicated or we've endured hardships or any kind of trials and tribulations that have come our way. So I know in last week's episode I did talk about Friday Night SmackDown because that was an event that we were going to go attend. And this past weekend, Friday Night SmackDown, the WWE emanated from the Desert Diamond Arena in Glendale, Arizona. It was the 7th event that my brother Jared and I were able to attend. And it was the first event for my younger sister and the second event for my mom. So it was a good time. It was a good trip. This episode, I want to go ahead and just highlight, what happened at Friday Night SmackDown and what's really been happening in the world of professional wrestling. I think with the podcast as it is right now, I've always been centered around sports. I've always been centered around movies. And what better way to combine the two than to include the sport that really incorporates both worlds. Professional wrestling for many of us has, like I said, been an escape. It's been an opportunity for us to not only live through these characters, but to become invested in their stories, be invested in the matches and what they've carried on throughout the courses of their career, throughout the courses of these storylines that are being played out in front of our very eyes. Heading into Friday Night SmackDown, thankfully it wasn't too far of a drive. It was like a 7-mile drive from where we live. The arena itself, it seems a lot bigger on TV. I will say that. When we entered the arena, it didn't seem, that, I wouldn't say it didn't seem that big, but they're really good in terms of their camera work on hiding that and really emphasizing the crowd and seeing how big it is, again, across television. The opening dark match saw Cedric Alexander and Ashante the Adonis, formerly that of a member of Hit Row, defeat Pretty Deadly. The crowd was red hot. Off the get-go, it's a dark match. They were getting into it, and that's exactly what you want to see when it comes to your dark match. You want to be able to elevate the crowd and get them prepared and get them ready for the night's show and for the matches that will follow. But it was the very first the very first segment that really took over and encapsulated the entire event. Many people have described this SmackDown as a landmark SmackDown that will go down for years to come as one of the most talked about SmackDowns, again, in recent memory. And I don't want to sound biased because we were there, but it is interesting to point out that when you have a segment surrounded around the bloodline, surrounded around Roman Reigns, the WWE undisputed Universal Champion for the last 3.5 years, and you place him with The Rock. Now that is ultimate star power. You don't get any bigger than those two guys. A lot of people have been speculating how this story is going to play out. Ultimately, we have to see the demise and the ending of this near 4-year reign that Roman has been able to sustain. Now, many people criticize that maybe it's jumped the shark, maybe it's gone too long, and maybe it's time for a change. That's why we've been clamoring for Cody Rhodes to be the guy to finish the story, to be the guy to ultimately unseat Roman as the face of the company. And I will give Roman his credit. I will give him his due. He's done a fantastic job at bringing wrestling back to the forefront. And many people might criticize him for his schedule because he's not on TV as he used to be. But taking that aside and seeing the in-ring work, not only in matches, but his character work, the slight subtleties in his body language, his facial expressions have improved greatly since we saw him last as a babyface, as the big dog in 2015 to 2019. I think it's now time that we recognize that Roman is up there. He's been able to solidify himself as one of the all-time greats, not only with this reign, but just the caliber of work he's been able to put in these last 4 years. But I digress. We open up the show with Roman Reigns and the Bloodline, of course, and he addresses the Glendale crowd. And he asks them to acknowledge him. The crowd boos. I mean, there was a good amount of cheers in the section that we were sitting in, but the crowd boos. And it takes him aback. He thinks, well, you guys were a lot louder the last time I was here. And the crowd begins to boo again. And it now starts registering with him. He becomes visibly upset, visibly frustrated and angry at the crowd because they're not acknowledging him. And now here he is, the world champion for the last 4 years, arguably one of the greatest world champions we've seen in recent time. And he yells into the microphone to acknowledge him. Again, another sign of frustration and anger. I'm the champion. I'm the guy. Why aren't they cheering me? Why aren't they supporting me? He gets frustrated. He tells Paul Heyman, he tells the wise man, hey, I've fulfilled my contract, my obligation. I don't need to be here. I've already showed up. I already gave the people what they wanted. They've seen me and done that. They don't need to see me no more. Let's bounce. Let's call it a day. Get the jet ready, he said. And Paul Heyman informs his tribal chief that, hey, we got to wait for The Rock. The Rock still has to show up. And now we're seeing Roman again visibly frustrated. Why do I have to wait for him? I'm the champ. I call the shots. Why do I have to wait for him? And then The Rock comes out. And the crowd erupts. Again, most of us were booing. But, of course, how could we not cheer? It's The Rock. And it's tough. Because I know in this instant, I want to cheer for The Rock. But given the story that we're telling, I'm not supposed to. And of course, like I told my sister and my mom, this day and age, you can cheer for whoever you want. You don't have to follow the status quo just because this is a good guy. You don't got to cheer him just because that's a bad guy. You don't got to boo him. You follow who you like. But Dwayne comes out in his nice, expensive shirt. The ones he used to wear back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And he addresses the crowd. And he goes on to verbally eviscerate the crowd, referring to them as crack addicts and meth addicts and just the type of stuff you would expect him to say as a heel, of course, but to say 20 years ago. And it was so refreshing. I know for my brother and I, we had a good time with it because it's been so long since we've seen The Rock open up as a heel. And again, it was just refreshing to hear it. He goes on to criticize the audience. And I would be remiss to not mention the 20-minute video he uploaded earlier in the day addressing Cody, addressing everything that's happened. And it answered so many questions. If you guys haven't seen the video and are invested in this story as much as we are, you got to go check it out. It's on his social media pages, on Twitter, on Instagram. You can find it on YouTube probably somewhere. But he goes on to lay out the timeline of Roman returning, of The Rock returning, on day one, the event of Monday Night Raw 2024. That was what the event was called, day one. And how he hints at going after Roman Reigns. And then we fast forward to the Royal Rumble, where Cody would win the Royal Rumble, earning a title shot against Roman Reigns in the main event of WrestleMania. And then giving up that match and presenting it to The Rock. And The Rock goes on to say that we made a verbal agreement that you would step aside and that I would be able to face Roman Reigns because it was the money matchup. It was the marquee match. Above anything else, it would be the biggest match in WrestleMania history. But then somewhere along the line, Cody changed his mind. And The Rock says he's entitled to that. He's entitled to changing his mind. But it's the way that he went about it that he didn't like. Doing it on live TV, doing it in front of an audience, and not speaking to him man to man. That's compelling storytelling. Because a lot of people were freaking out, me included. But what are they doing? Why are they pushing The Rock versus Roman? We want to see Cody get one more crack at Roman Reigns. But a lot of other podcasters, Sam Roberts, who I follow, he would always say, just let them cook. Give them some time. Maybe they're going with this in a certain way. Maybe it's all part of the plan. Now, arguably, that's easy for them to say. They still say that WrestleMania 30's Daniel Bryan storyline was a part of the plan, but we know it wasn't. We know that wasn't the part of the plan. And 10 years later, we weren't about to have a repeat of them foolishly pushing the wrong match and the wrong man. Thus began the wave of support for Cody Rhodes, which people already support him. He's already the number one babyface. He's the top guy. But now this only solidifies it. This only enhances this. So Roman Reigns and The Rock are in the ring. And Rock, he lays down the challenge, right? He tells the audience, but of course he challenges Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes to a tag team match on WrestleMania Saturday, night 1. If you guys win, then Cody's match with Roman will be free of the bloodline. You will not see one member of the bloodline at ringside. It would be one-on-one, straight-up match. But if Rock and Roman win, then it bloodline rules. Any hints that, Jimmy can be the timekeeper or the referee, Paul Heyman could be running commentary, it would be roughshod. It would be open house. Anything goes. Just like it's been all for the last 4 years. It's interesting to see where they're going to go with this. And me personally, I have my own theories. I have two. Either one, this is where we're going to see The Rock turn on Roman. I think it's a little too early. I think we still have a lot of time to build up for this. I personally think this is a match that could take place at WrestleMania 41 next year, which we still don't have a location for yet. Or you have Rock and Roman win, thus enforcing bloodline rules in the main event of Mania. And I think that opens up the door for this endgame-like ending that a lot of people are speculating. We're going to need the guys like Jey Uso, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, maybe even LA Knight, Randy Orton, people of that caliber who have been wronged by the bloodline. All these guys have been cheated out of their moment. And now it's up to them to ensure that Cody can finally do it. That he can finally defeat the bloodline, rid them of the richest prize in professional wrestling, and ultimately allow him to finish his story. I think that's what happens. I don't think Brock turns on Roman just yet. It will happen, not just yet. I think the second option is what's going to happen. We have Rock and Roman go over, again casting doubt whether or not Cody can get it done, building up the drama, and then ultimately we're going to have this big moment a la WrestleMania 10 where they all lifted up Brett when he won the world title. All these guys are going to lift Cody up as he wins the world title here at WrestleMania 40. That's just my speculation. I think that's what's going to happen. But the segment itself, it ran for 40 minutes. Can you believe that? 40 minutes, a near hour. That's half the show, basically. And because of that, the next match suffered from it. It was Tiffany Stratton versus Naomi, a returning Naomi, who returned at the Royal Rumble, by the way. The Rock and Roman segment had gone over 10 minutes. So now that's 10 minutes that we have to allot and adjust because it's a 2-hour show, right? Tiffany and Naomi had a fun match. Tiffany goes over, of course. I think that's the right call. I think it was interesting to have Naomi lose clean because you could have placed someone else in that spot. But nonetheless, Tiffany Stratton, I think, is going to be a star that was waiting to happen. I mean, she's already gone over with the crowd. She's already gone over with Australia. And that's now translated here to the States. So I definitely think that's someone to watch out for. And speaking of the women, this segment with Damage Control, Bayley and Dakota Kai taking on the Kabuki Warriors, Asuka and Kairi Sane. I think a lot of people anticipated the ending of that match, but I think it's the right call. Dakota Kai turns her back on her friend, Bayley, and what a moment, man. You're thinking the hot tag is coming. Bayley inching closer and closer to her partner Dakota Kai, and just at the last second, as she reaches out to tag her, Dakota Kai jumps off of the apron, and thus the whole group of Damage Control, all four of them, just beat down Bayley. And it's the right call, because you want to be able to build up that sympathy for your babyface. You want to be able to build up that support that we want Bayley to get hers. We want her to win the world title. It was the right call. I mean, it was a little obvious, but sometimes the obvious answer is the right answer. I tell you what wasn't obvious was the next match. Braun Breaker had a little bit of a squash match. You know, it was his debut match in SmackDown. I was very curious to see how they would go about it. Once I saw who he was fighting, it was another one of those young talents from NXT. I wouldn't go as far as to call him local talent or a jobber, but I kind of knew it would be a short match. I didn't think it was going to be 8 seconds. It was a short match. And I remember my mom asking, like, who is this guy? Oh, Braun Breaker, you're going to love him. Again, but blink and you missed it. The whole match was shorter than his entrance. And I'm curious to see how they're going to balance that between, NXT, their developmental brand, and his time on SmackDown. He just won the tag titles with Baron Corbin a couple weeks ago. I do not anticipate them to hold that title for long, just because he's already on the main roster. But, nonetheless, for me personally, match of the night had to go to the street fight. Carlito versus Santos Escobar, which was a battle of the Legado del Fantasma and the LWO, Latino World Order. All street fights are not created equal. Some are better than the others, and I thought this was a really fun matchup that encapsulated, again, the feud that these two groups have been battling. And it also helps that you have a crowd that is engaged. There was a "We Want Apples" chant, a la Carlito. And the cherry on top, man, was the return of Rey Mysterio. And they knew what they're doing. Arizona is highly populated with a lot of Hispanic fans there. So to be able to have a returning Rey Mysterio who comes out on a couple crutches because he's currently selling his injury, and to see him come out and just put the beat down on Legado, it was great. And what a pop. He had a great pop. And once that music hit, everyone knew who it was. And we got a little 619 action as well from Rey Mysterio. So match of the night, I thought, went to them. And then there was the closer, which was Randy Orton versus LA Knight, which was a fun match. I absolutely loved the finish. The roll through that Austin Theory had, and then counter with an RKO by Randy Orton to send the crowd home happy. Just great. Just great stuff. I'm curious to see what they're going to go with this, because we're heading into WrestleMania. Randy Orton and Kevin Owens kind of have beef with Logan Paul, but they just beefed with Austin Theory and Grayson Waller, who have a little bit of a beef between themselves right now, actually. I know it's been thrown out that a multi-man United States Championship match could be in the mix. I would love to see that, especially if it was under a ladder match. Wouldn't be opposed to that. Of course, that would end the show, Friday Night SmackDown. But we got a couple bonus matchups as well. We saw The Miz suffer a loss to Damian Priest. And in the main event of the night, we saw the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes, take on Drew McIntyre, the winner of the Raw Elimination Chamber match. A real big matchup. Heading into this show, I had bought the tickets in December. It was like an early Christmas gift for my family. And in the last year, my mom has really gotten invested in Cody Rhodes. And for me and my brother, we've known him forever. I know my brother Jared goes all the way back to Legacy. But me, I've watched him since 2007 when he debuted alongside his father, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. And to see the growth, man, is just tremendous. I think the amount of success and fanfare that he has received in recent years is well earned. Not even well deserved, but just well earned, man. To see what he went through and to see all his hard work pay off. So happy for him. I had posted over the weekend on my social media outlets about our time there. And I'd be real hard pressed to find a moment where I was more proud to be a fan of pro wrestling than I was that night. Because to see how invested my mom has gotten in his story, and for those who are listening and may not be the biggest pro wrestling fans as me or as anyone else who's listening to this podcast, Cody Rhodes, the son of Dusty Rhodes, a famous, legendary wrestler in his own right, who was one of the greatest wrestling minds to have ever joined the business. Many of his innovations, many of his ideas still resonate with a lot of fans and a lot of other wrestlers in the business today. And Cody, having to live up to those expectations, it's not easy. It's not easy being the son of a legend or being the son of someone who's successful. His father, Dusty Rhodes, was the trainer at their developmental and would train a bunch of these talents, a lot of which that we see today. Guys like Roman Reigns, Charlotte Flair, Seth Rollins. I could go on and on. There was a lot of stars. Around this time, Cody leaves the WWE. And it's basically a made job. Like, he has a made career there. But he wanted to be his own man. He wanted to be able to create his own path. He wanted to be able to prove to them, I'm more than what you guys are promoting me as. I can be the top guy. Versus being on the lower level of the card. And he did so. He crossed the indies. He built up his name. He built up his resume. He built up his reputation. He built up the alternative wrestling company, All Elite Wrestling, alongside the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, and Tony Khan. And then finally he returns. He returns to finish the story. Now the story is simple. His father, back in the 70s, 1977, challenged superstar Billy Graham for the WWF Championship and would win the match via countout. You can't win the title unless you pin or make the champion submit. So Dusty Rhodes won the match, but he didn't win the title. And since then, it's been Cody's mission to win the title that his father never had. Now, Dusty had passed away in 2015. So for him, he could no longer win that championship and place it in the hands of his father, but he could win that championship and have the name that his father gave him attached to it forever. And that story really resonates with our family because of the love and support and the admiration that he has for his father. It resonates in our household. So to see, in the past year, to see my mom and my sister just invested in the story. At times, maybe even more than us. And I'm really invested in it. She was so happy to see him. And I know for the last couple of months, the last couple of weeks, she would ask me, is he going to be there? Is he going to be there? Oh, I don't know. And I truly didn't. But I had a feeling he would. I always told her if he wins the Royal Rumble, he's going to challenge Roman. Roman's on SmackDown. It would make sense for him to appear on SmackDown. So when he won the Rumble, it was only academic. It was obvious. Okay, then he has to show up on SmackDown. It's just a matter of which episode. And luckily enough, he was there. And after the match, Cody wins by disqualification, I should say. He got jumped in the middle of the match. But then the conclusion of the match happens. And, the show's over and he's waving goodbye to the crowd. He sends them home happy. A lot of people start to leave. And not us. We're just, there enjoying our time and, taking pictures, videos, whatever. And in the midst of it, my mom just bolts. We're not, super high in the seating. We're not super low. We're, in the middle. We're in really good seats, I thought. But she bolts and she's going lower. She wants to go to the lower level. And you can see on my TikTok, the highlights of it, and you can see how close we get. We got really close, and she's there yelling at, screaming at Cody to get his attention. My sister's yelling too. It's my sister's birthday. Happy birthday, by the way. By the time this episode comes out, it already passed. But they're both trying to get his attention, and me, I'm just worried. I'm if security gets a hold of us, I don't want to get banned from these future events, So after like another 20 minutes heckling him, basically just asking him to just acknowledge us, he didn't, of course, because he was busy with other people, which is fine, totally fine. But to see her just so excited, and we went to go see them on March 1st, which is the wedding anniversary of my parents. They had gotten not even their wedding anniversary. It was when they, got together officially as a couple in 1993. So that marks their 31st anniversary together. 31 years, man. That's amazing. Only one could dream to amass that kind of a relationship. And I don't tell them enough, how impressive that is. But it really is. So to be able to create that memory with her and my family, it was a beautiful thing. And I know I tweeted something out, basically an open thank you to Cody Rhodes, because people like him, I'm sure they have an idea, but I don't think they know the type of reach that they have in other people's lives. And to tie up, this whole recap of SmackDown, that's really what it is for us and for a lot of people. What pro wrestling, and not necessarily just pro wrestling, but whatever your pro wrestling is, whatever the thing is that you call your fandom, or that you devote your time and your energy towards, it has its reach. It's just immeasurable. The way it touches you emotionally, the way it affects you mentally, and how it affects the way you just go about your life. It can't be measured. That's what that is for us. So I'm blessed to have been able to take her to that show and to have her witness her favorite wrestler, who was also coincidentally my favorite wrestler right now. In the same way that I was proud to be able to bring my father and our family to the Niner games the last few years. This was another one of those highlights for me personally. Just being able to work, save up the money, buy the tickets, take them there, and then just create these memories. That's what it's all about, is creating memories. So that episode will forever be a great memory for me, and I look fondly upon it, especially because there's a point during the Rock and Roman segment where you could see us in the crowd. And if you check out, I uploaded on my TikTok page, I uploaded on the YouTube Shorts at J Area Podcast. There's a moment you can find us in the crowd. A really good, and there was multiple times you could find us, but I uploaded the best shot. And I'm so happy because I told him ahead of time, I said, where we're going to sit, we're facing the hard cam. So there's a good shot that they're going to get us on camera. And sure enough, they did. It was kind of towards the end of the Rock segment where we as a crowd started chanting, "You sold out" to him. And there's a shot where he just, is taken aback. And the camera angle changes to the crowd. And you can see us towards the top of the screen, kind of the top middle, top rightish, which will mark the third time that my brother and I have been on WWE television. So at any time, if you guys want any future bookings, you can find me in my DMs or on my Gmail. But no, nonetheless, just an awesome time. And if you ever have a chance to go to one of these events, whether you're a fan or not, I highly suggest you do. The crowd is electric, and the shows are always fun. Always a great time. But yeah, as I mentioned before, it was the 7th overall event that my brother and I had attended. We usually would go with our dad to these events, so to invite our mom and our sister was certainly a different experience. And I know I touched on it earlier, but being able to see them become invested in these athletes, invested in the storylines, it really made me proud of the sport itself. And having devoted so many years as a fan, and being able to share that with my family, to share that with my sister, who only knew much of it through Jared and I. She was invested because of us. And I know she spoke and she said that it was that sense of nostalgia for her because she grew up with it always around the house, always on. We were always talking about it. So for her to go through and see an event live, it brought her back to how he and I would interact and talk about it. And we still do on a daily basis. It's one of those things where it's always something we're talking about and keeping up with. One of the biggest things that she noticed and that she wanted to tell me was the crowd. She loved the crowd interaction and how invested they were in the event, and cheering, booing, the oohs, the ahs. It's always a grand spectacle, and that was just an average event for television. That was filming Friday Night SmackDown. That wasn't a pay-per-view event or a PLE as they're now referred to. That wasn't a WrestleMania like the one in 2010 when they arrived in Glendale, Arizona, in the University of Phoenix Stadium, now known as the State Farm Stadium. But nonetheless, with the podcast here, I do anticipate covering a little bit more about pro wrestling. It's become such a bigger aspect of my life, certainly in recent time. I know it's something that I grew up watching ever since I was a young kid. I can remember, watching it with my dad, watching it with my grandpa Felix, who really kind of helped introduce my love of the sport for it. We would watch it, and I remember vividly remembering ordering KFC and watching with him on Thursday nights. So it's something that's always been around, and I know there's a stigma around it that some people like to degrade those who are fans of it because it's fake, but I think that's a poor choice of words. I feel like the real word to use is choreographed and scripted, which isn't unlike any other television show or movie that we watch to this day. You could argue that anything is fake. Reality TV is fake. A lot of that stuff is staged. But I've now reached a point where I don't care anymore. And I feel like that's the point of this podcast too, is to just voice your opinions and talk about what you want to talk about and don't care about what other people say. Two of the greatest pieces of advice I have ever been given. One of them was life is a learning process. Because in everything that we do, whether it's failure, whether it's success, whether it's the wins or the losses, no matter what happens in our life, we continue to learn. We continue to grow. We're not the same person that we are the day before. Because it's the events that take place in our lives, it's the lessons that we learn that help us grow and to continue on this crazy world that we live in and this crazy path that is our life. The second best piece of advice was from my mom. The first one, of course, I mentioned on the podcast, that would be from my dad. But the second best piece of advice I got from my mom not too long ago. And when I was in pursuit of this podcast or becoming more public with my opinion and more public about my image and just sharing my thoughts and opinions with everybody, there was a part of me that was very hesitant because I would be talking about things that were close to me, that were personal to me, and maybe other people don't really care for it. I know, for example, in my family, people have contrasting beliefs or contrasting opinions on certain things, and I might be interested in pro wrestling one day. I might be talking about horror movies another day, or whatever's going on in the sporting world. And that might not attract certain people or certain audiences, but she sat me down and she just told me, sometimes there's going to be parts of your life where you're going to come across these moments of confusion. You're not going to be so sure about yourself. You're going to have these insecurities. But the line that really stuck with me was, there comes a point in our life where we have to stop caring about what other people think. It's our life. We're going to live our life. And I want to be able to go about my life and go about my business knowing that I did what I wanted with who I wanted and talked about what I wanted to do. And ultimately, if I can find satisfaction, if I can find a sense of fulfillment in that, that's good enough for me. And I feel like that's something I want to share with all of you, is that no matter what it is that you choose to do or whatever avenue you want to take in your life, in your career, your personal life, with your friends, family, significant other, doesn't matter. It is your life at the end of the day. Yes, you can, consult with other people about your life and seek advice and seek words of wisdom, but at the end of the day, it is your life. What my family wants me to do may be different from what I want to do. And that's the beauty of it. I might have different opinions than someone like my mom or someone like my friend from work. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. I can take that. I can take that and do what I want with it. I don't have to listen to it, but half the time I will. I will consider it because I'm open-minded like that. But always remember, it's your life. You do what you want to do. You do what makes you happy. You do what makes you fulfilled. And on that note, I want to thank you guys for listening to the J Area podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode where I kind of highlighted the events of Friday Night SmackDown, shed a little bit more insight in terms of my fandom of professional wrestling, and I don't know, maybe take something away from that little spiel that I had towards the end. You can always find me at just Jose_3. You can find me on all social media outlets with that username. Go ahead and like, share, subscribe. You see a lot more on the YouTube channel. I'm going to be uploading other videos and kind of opening it up and just making it more fun for me. I don't want it to become a thing where it feels like a job. I don't want it to be something that becomes routine, but I want it to be fun. I want it to be an outlet for me to express myself, for me to connect with you guys, and just have a good time. That's essentially what this has always been about. It's not only an opportunity to be a hobby, but it's an opportunity to just build something cool, something that I can enjoy. And I know I've always looked at it this way, as I want to be able to attract and entertain other people with different mindsets or similar mindsets. And I want to be able to entertain them and amuse them. But ultimately, it's me just amusing myself and just having fun, doing things that would make me laugh. And if it happens to make other people laugh and have a good time, then fantastic. That's why I say go ahead and join the J Area. You subscribe, like, share with your friends and family. Nonetheless, it always helps out. Anything to help grow this, and I could never express my appreciation and the thanks that I give to you guys every week. So I look forward to seeing you guys next week on the podcast. And again, keep looking out for new videos uploaded ever so often. I'm not going to promise you guys certain days, but we're still working it out. We're figuring it out, and we're having fun. That's the basis of this podcast. That's the basis of this YouTube channel. We're just having fun, man. So yeah, go ahead and follow me at justjose_3. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or X, whatever they call it at this point. And on the YouTube channel, J Area Podcast, or you can find it at Jose Ramos Jr., which is the name that will be going forward with that. And with that being said, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on the next episode.